So, welcome, thanks for coming. My talk dealing with mental illness or how I learned to dislike myself less. I don't know either of you, so my name is JD, I'm a technical architect. If you want to find me on Slack, I'm Dorf, on Twitter, JD does dev. If you tweet, DCAVL, and OSMI help. Do either of you know what OSMI is, or have you heard of it? Okay. Have you?
No.
Okay. I'll talk about them a little bit later. This thing is being weird. So I'd like to start off with a friendly hello, so hello. I also like to start off with a couple disclaimers. Not a doctor, not here to give medical advice. Not a lawyer, not here to give legal advice. I tend to swear a little bit without thinking about it, so heads up. I try to keep it PG-13. And I'm going to be going into quite a bit of detail. All right, so why are we here? I don't mean that in a philosophical sense. I mean having the conversation. I'm here to talk with you about something important to me, and hopefully it's important to you. I hope you're here because you want to take part in a conversation or maybe learn something. And I'm also here to tell a story and hope that it helps somebody in a way that someone else's story helped me. So let's have a conversation. You're going to learn a lot about me. I want to know who I'm talking with. So what do you do? Yeah.
I run the Drupal agency
Okay.
for the last 15 years in Fairfax, Virginia, but I am also a mindfulness practitioner.
All right. Well, welcome. What about you?
I'm a developer and data analyst.
Okay. So you kind of wear many hats. You're more siloed, but it kind of spreads out a little bit. So a little bit about me. I've been doing Drupal and PHP for about 6 years. I've been doing HTML since the 90s. I started learning BASIC around the same time. Have either of you had the pleasure of working with BASIC or QBasic? Yeah, it was the way I learned. There was a magazine called 321 Contact, and in the back of it, every issue, they had a page, like on paper, of code with line numbers 10, 20, 30, and you would have to type it line by line into QBasic or whatever your editor was and hope that it runs. So it was really fun, a good intro to debugging. I also help organize MidCamp. I help organize the Chicago Drupal meetup. And before all this, I was a firefighter, or well, mainly paramedic for about 10 years. So I made a little bit of a change. Also, I have mental illnesses. Now, why do I care about this? Why do I do this talk? For a long time, I was in denial. I was afraid that admitting something wasn't right would make it real. One of those situations where you're in perfect health until a doctor tells you otherwise. I also worried that if I told people that they'd treat me different. If I said, hey, I feel this way, they'd no, I don't want anything to do with you. But now, something I need to tell myself, and I still have a hard time convincing myself of, is I'm not weak, I'm sick. Not damaged, I have a disease, it's a condition, it's not a choice. So I'm going to be talking a lot about mental illness, otherwise this would be over 5 minutes ago. Mental illness is a wide term that refers to a wide range of mental health conditions, which are disorders that affect your mood, behavior, and how you think. There's a book called the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders. The first version was published in 1952, so in the history of this country, it's only been around for 70 years. That's not a very long time. It has a lot of diagnoses. I think the last count was about 150, a little over 150 specific diagnoses, and that's not counting the variations like bipolar 1, bipolar 2, major depression, depressive occurrences. If you put all those together, it's well over 600. I'm also here to talk about the stigma. Stigma around mental illness. Now, why is that a thing? For most of history, people who had mental illness were treated as less than. They were treated as criminals or possessed by demons or, what have you. It just, something's not right, we're going to shove them off, sweep them under the rug. Which led to some stereotypes because, the home for the criminally insane or, send them off to the loony bin, stuff like that. It led to stereotypes that people with mental illness are dangerous because they were put in a place where dangerous people are. They weren't seen as people, they were their disease. When you hear the word a schizophrenic, that's putting schizophrenia first. That's not putting the person first, as opposed to a person with schizophrenia. oh, don't worry about them, they're just bipolar. No, they're a person with bipolar disorder. There was a study done by the University of Ohio, I think Ohio State, sorry, done in 2016 where they did a survey. And the survey had exactly the same questions to two groups, except for the wording and stuff. And one of the questions was, would you feel comfortable being in the same room as the mentally ill? Versus, would you feel comfortable being in the same room as someone with mental illness? When you use the person first language, people were much more positive in general. But when you made it that the disorder was the main thing, that had a much more negative response. And mental illness has always been used as an insult. Like I said, send them off to the loony bin. Oh, they're just off their meds again. Now for me, keeping it with Drupal, my personal issue queue. These are more tags than actual issues, but hopefully you get the idea. Major depression. I changed font sizes earlier, and I didn't realize it was going to be this small on the screen, so I apologize. Major depression, anxiety disorder, PTSD, ADHD, and TBD. I say that because there's a lot of comorbidity and coexistence between disorders where the signs and symptoms of one can mimic another with different pathologies. So I'm going to define these. Depression, feelings of low self-worth or guilt and reduced ability to enjoy life with symptoms present for every day for at least 2 weeks. Anxiety disorder, feelings of worry or fear that are strong enough to interfere with your daily activities. This little bit is the amygdala, your lizard brain. It has 4 basic functions: fight or flight, feed or breed. Now, for somebody with anxiety, like me, I forgot my clicker's not working. My amygdala. Artist representation, dramatization. In case you couldn't tell, it's not a real X-ray or a CT scan. But mine is overactive. PTSD. It's failure to recover after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. And best way I can explain that is something gets stuck in your short-term memory. You can't process it. It doesn't move back to the long-term, and it makes it so that you can relive it after anything. Anything that reminds you, sight, sound, smell, just brings it back. And not just remember it, relive it. ADHD. Hyperactivity, impulsivity, inattention that could lead to difficulty in academic, emotional, and social functioning. When I was a kid, this was, he's just daydreaming. He just can't focus. Just go run it off. It wasn't, hey, this is an issue. Maybe we should take care of it. Now, I've only been getting treatment for a short time. Relatively speaking, I didn't get treatment until I hit after the beginning of my 30s. Now, the reason I mentioned this is because I said it's about to get personal. But first, a little pre-palate cleanser. Something to smile about, hopefully, before getting into this. All right, my normal was not normal. For as long as I can remember, I felt this way. And we could have the nature versus nurture debate. My childhood was rough. I witnessed physical and verbal abuse between people who were supposed to provide a sense of security for me. I was emotionally abused, which can take many different forms, and I suffered through many of them. I was left alone a lot from a very young age. The term turnkey kid, or I think that might latchkey, I don't. But I was left alone, probably before I should have been, which kind of made it hard for me to make connections because I didn't know how to people. So I had very few friends. I didn't have guidance, so I didn't really know how to take care of myself. Had bad hygiene, overweight. I was bullied a lot. I didn't know how to handle emotions, so I lashed out, cried, and I blamed myself because I was a kid. I had nobody else to blame. They're leaving me here because I did something wrong. People don't like me because I did something wrong. And I never had a sense of safety, so I became afraid of everything and angry at everything. And, the nature side, my brain is probably predisposed to this kind of behavior. Nurture side, this didn't help. But with all that, I had one particular enemy. I'd like to introduce you. The mirror. I would see this every time that I look in the mirror. Every single day. I hated what I saw, couldn't understand how anybody could like me, let alone want to be around me. But it wasn't the mirror saying it. It was me. It was my reflection. It was me looking at myself saying, "You fat asshole," and just meanest things I could. And just, I hated myself. And this was normal for most of my life. Like I said, I'm going to be 37 shortly. I didn't start getting treatment until about 32, a little bit later than that. I would try to fake confidence. It didn't work. I would act like things didn't bother me, but they really did, so I tried to brush it off at the beginning and then just internalize it for later. I would get angry sometimes, and by sometimes I mean all the time. I was afraid of everything, paranoid. I had deep valleys where I couldn't do anything, which led me to feeling useless, which made me unable to function. And then if anything wrong happened, I felt that I would mess up everything I touch. I couldn't focus on anything. I was in fear of losing my job because I couldn't focus. I wasn't doing the work. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Also, because I was a paramedic, I don't know, not everybody in public service is this way, but I was a paramedic. And I wasn't allowed to be sick. I helped the sick. I wasn't allowed to be hurt. We're above it. It doesn't happen to us. But it does. I can name way too many people who I worked with on a one-to-one basis on the ambulance who have died of suicide. It's pretty prevalent in the public service because too many people have this, "I'm better than that, I don't need help." I wasn't confident, but I had this pride just because I drove a truck that went woo-woo. But something happened. And when I say something, I mean some things. I wish I could say it was a single moment, but it wasn't. It was a series of events. Started off with me having a full-blown panic attack when I was driving to college. I was a paramedic for 10 years. I didn't go to college until my very, very late 20s, going into 30s. I went to a community college, drove up, no test, no speech, no quiz, no homework due, just a regular day of class, and I pulled in and I freaked out big time. I just gave myself any excuse not to go in. Ended up putting my car in reverse, driving home. It wasn't my first panic attack, but it was the first one I questioned, hey, maybe this isn't right. Then I eventually had a career change. And to get there, I started hanging out in online developer communities. And I found out that the developer community at large, open source community, is much more inclusive than public service, ambulance, things like that. It's a very welcoming community, and that's amazing. I also had a health scare. Very high level, I found a lump where there shouldn't be, and I got scared. Everything turned out to be benign, but I started reevaluating a lot of things, including my own mental health, and I accepted that I needed help. This was the hardest thing. I saw other people living happy lives, not going through the same things I was. People didn't get angry like I did. People weren't affected by everyday things like I was, and I had an epiphany. Kind of a situation where if everywhere you go smells like dog crap, look at your own shoes. Maybe I'm the one who needed help. This was a hard part, a very, very hard part. All the signs were there, but I couldn't see them. I had fear, afraid of everything. Crippling fear of everyday things, social situations paralyzed me. I canceled plans a lot. Led to anger. I was mad at everything, at the world, that lizard brain, I showed you the big green picture. Mine was just angry. And again, the 4 basic reactions: fight, flight, feed, or breed. If I can't eat it or make babies with it, I'm going to run away or I'm going to fight it. And I did a lot of running away and fighting. Hate was more of a misunderstanding. People thought I was hateful when I was angry, when I was just didn't know how to handle things. I realized I was suffering and there was something I could do about it, and that's all thanks to a 900-year-old Muppet. A wise Jedi. Fear is a path to the dark side. So, I finally got treatment. I take medication. I'm a big fan of better living through chemistry. I see a therapist. I find outlets. I do stuff in the Drupal community. I do stuff in my local community, and I start the conversation. But it wasn't easy. There's a very, very frustrating period between collecting my first diagnosis and getting my medication that could help me. Therapy was great, but my brain chemistry just needed a little boost. In case you didn't know, the American health system is not wonderful. So I was able to get into a therapist within a couple weeks of deciding that it was time. After they said, you have this, you need this, I couldn't get into a physician for another 3 months. So it was a very, very long, gray, uncomfortable period. But during this time, I attended a talk by Ed Finkler, who founded OSMI. And again, I'm going to talk about OSMI a little bit in a few slides. But it helped me realize something very important. Sitting in a room with all those people there to hear the same talk is that we're not alone. Since getting diagnosed, getting treatment, and getting rid of the stigma from myself, I realized that I'm not alone, which means we're not alone. Nobody is the only one going through this. Put it in a programming kind of way, may have different variables or properties, but the interface is the same. A lot of people are going through it. I realized I was afraid because of the way that people might view me, and I don't feel that way anymore because of conversations that I've had. Now, since getting treatment, before I wanted to hide in shame, but now it's part of me. I know it's part of me. It's who I am. I don't have as deep valleys. I still have bad valleys. They're much less frequent. The downside is I don't have the peaks. I don't have bipolar disorder, but with depression comes some peaks and valleys, just not to the extent of bipolar. And when I would have those good periods, I would fly. I'd be great at everything I did, but it was only for a short time. Now I'm much more leveled out, and I'm much more productive over longer periods of time than productive, very unproductive. My anxiety has gone down a lot, but it still pops up occasionally. Can't help that. I've also become more comfortable in social situations. I'm still pretty introverted, so after this conference, I'm probably going to go hide for a while. I don't have nearly as many anxiety attacks, and also, I work with OSMI. So, OSMI, said you're familiar with it, stands for Open Sourcing Mental Illness. Main focus is opening the conversation and erasing the stigma around mental illness, specifically in the tech community. Ed Finkler founded it a few years ago. I got 501c3 status just a couple years ago, and it's run by some amazing people. Also, I can tolerate this thing a little bit more, just a little. And it can tolerate me just a little bit more. Sorry for the small text. It says, even though we don't agree on everything, you have some valid opinions and shouldn't be afraid to share them occasionally, but not too much. Don't wear out your welcome, jerk. Also, we're not alone. And I mean this in general, but more specifically in the tech community. But why the tech community? It was suspected for a long time. There have been some studies, nothing really specific to tech people, but creative people tend to be more prone to depression and anxiety. OSMI forums used to be devpression.com, but OSMI helped keep that going. And word of mouth were kind of all that there were to go on. And one of the reasons that I say intelligent, creative people are more prone to it is because they tend to think over situations, not just overthink, but replay events. Especially as a developer, hey, this variable is not getting set in the right place. What's happening? And you replay it. Now, for me, I replay every event, every bad thing that's ever happened, and I find out, or try to figure out what went wrong. How could I have changed this? And every time I do that, I put more blame on myself for, well, you made the wrong decision. You made the wrong decision. It's your fault. A lot of people can just let go of it and not look for the cause-event connection, or the cause-effect connection. But not me. And replaying it can just lead to feeling depressed or hopeless, because if something happened and if you can find just one little decision that maybe could have changed it and put the blame on yourself, if you're someone like me, that's exactly what I do. There's also a little thing called imposter syndrome, or imposter phenomenon, that you don't deserve to be doing what you're doing, that sometime soon somebody's going to find out that everything you've been working on is a fraud and the bottom's going to fall out. For me, this was difficult until I saw that everybody has some level of this. And talking to people who are way up high. I mean, like, it was either Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin who basically said, all I did was walk on the moon. Like it was no big deal. And no, I'm not special, all I did was this. So it's not just everyday people. But it is very common in developer community. For me, to deal with it, I taught myself that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. Everybody knows something that somebody else doesn't. Everybody can be valuable, and if you're in a good structure, asking for help isn't going to be seen as, hey idiot, why don't you know this? It's okay, let's make it a teachable moment. If I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who does, or I'll point you in the right direction. All right, a couple questions for you. Would you tell someone with glasses or contacts to try looking harder? Big no. Would you ask someone in a wheelchair why they decided not to walk? Would you tell someone with diabetes or a heart condition to stop taking their meds and snap out of it? All right, let's do some Mad Libs. Would you try someone with depression to try being happy? Would you ask someone having a panic attack, they tried harder not to have anxiety? Have you ever told somebody with ADHD to stop taking their medicine and just try focusing? Have you thought about maybe not being distracted? We've all been on the internet. We've all seen memes. Some of my favorites are ones like this. This is an antidepressant. This is shit. That's literally a lifesaver for me. I don't need pills to be happy. I do. One of my personal favorites, you don't need antidepressants if you lift. Now, I'm not here to shame anybody who's able to overcome by exercise alone. Great, if it works for you, it's amazing. But I need the help. So I ask that nobody shames people who take medicine. All those say the same thing. It's a decision to feel this way, you know? The only reason that I feel this way is because I don't walk in the woods or I don't power lift. And that it says that you don't need help. It's something you could will yourself out of if you really want to. I can vouch for the effects of medication. Obviously, I'm standing here. But everyone is different, and what works for me may not work for the next person, and that's fine. And we have our own meme. If you can't make your own neurotransmitters, store-bought, it's fine. So, that stigma. How do we get rid of it? Collectively, we need to be stronger than fear. And I don't mean beat your fear at arm wrestling. I mean, not be afraid to start a conversation or listen. Let people know that they matter. Don't be ashamed. If you do have an illness, don't be ashamed of it. It's not a damage. It's not a defect. It's a disease. One thing that I do ask, though, is everybody be respectful, too, because not all disabilities are visible. Not all cuts bleed. Try to be respectful of what you say or how you portray diseases. Being sad, having a bad day is not the same as someone who has major depression. Liking to be organized and not be cluttered is not the same as OCD. I did a talk for Marketo a little while back, and the woman who went before me has OCD, and she was telling her story, and it was amazing. I hated the fact that they put me after her because it was a pretty high bar to set. But the way she put it is, a person with OCD has compulsions. Obviously, that's part of the name, but the compulsions aren't just, well, I think that I like to do this, or, I really don't like being messy. It's, imagine you're allergic to blueberries. Deathly allergic. You eat a blueberry, most likely you'll die. But your brain is just telling you, eat that blueberry, or everything you value in life is going to be destroyed. If you don't eat that blueberry, you're done for. People you love are done for. And that's OCD. You have to do it. Your body, your brain, everything is making you feel that if you don't do it, the end of the world is coming. If you do feel that you have a disease, get treatment. Now, I've been talking anecdotes for quite a while, but I do have some facts, because one of the things that OSMI does is an annual mental health and tech survey. We do that every year. It's about 20 minutes long. The last one had about 800 responses, made available to several different tech communities in the US, and all these responses are self-reported. One of the questions, would you bring up a physical health issue with a potential employer at an interview? Why do I keep picking that up? Big chunk said no, 23% said yes. Okay, but same question, change out to mental. Would you bring up a mental health issue? Only 5% there say yes. pretty significant difference. Not saying that everybody should walk into an interview and say, hey, I've got this, but they wouldn't feel comfortable. From the 2016, because we didn't have this question on the 2017 survey, do you feel that being identified as a person with a mental health issue would hurt your career? Lots of answers. Maybe 41% it has, 7 think it would, 39. So this whole chunk is kind of in the positive in a negative way. Only 12% say it has not or I don't think it would. This is something I worry about every time I give this talk, but it's kind of freeing to know that anytime somebody is looking to hire me or thinking about it, they can Google my name at Drupal TV and find several videos of me giving similar talks. My cards are on the table. If you hire me after that, cool. It's on you now. Do you feel discussing a physical health issue would have negative consequences with your employer? Yes, only 4%. Pretty tiny slice. Okay, hey, I broke a leg. I'm having problems. But do you think discussing a mental health issue? 23%. Over 5 times more people think that it would have negative consequences to discuss a mental health issue. Now, this is self-reported. The US average is about 20%. Have you been diagnosed with a mental health condition? 43% of people said yes from the survey. The average in the US is 20%. To the follow-up question, do you think you have a mental health condition? This includes that 43% for yes. Yes, still 43, but possibly 19. So that's over 50% of people believe that they either do or they may have a mental health condition. And this 19%, that, to me, that's a concern because possibly, but for some reason, not getting treatment, whether it be economical reasons, whether it be just afraid to, I would like to see that 19% go away. But what do these mean? Well, to me, it means we're afraid to talk about mental illness, especially if we're the ones suffering from it. But it also means that we're not alone. The fear comes from the stigma. The stigma comes from a really, really bad history. But it's something that we can change. We're afraid that being honest will hurt us. If you have anxiety, worrying about something like this can really, really tear you up inside. And if you're like me, my mind goes to the worst case scenario anytime. My email password for some reason doesn't work, I'm sending out a resume. I just assumed that I was fired and nobody told me. That's how my mind works. We're also afraid in the workplace that we might get sent to the HR department. I don't know my HR rep. I couldn't point them out in a lineup if I had to. So if I don't know HR, and this happened at a previous job, I told my boss, hey, I have depression, I need a day off, I need a chance to recover. And it was pretty much, I can't talk with you about this, you'll be hearing from somebody shortly. I got a call from my HR rep, who I then had to tell the same thing to, but I didn't know them, I wasn't comfortable with them, and I had to divulge stuff that I had worked up for a long time to talk with somebody that I talk with on a regular basis. Now, as of 2015, that number translates to 43.4 million adults. That's a lot, and that's any mental illness. So why should a workplace care about that number, though? Because depression alone, that's a little chunk of that giant book, impacts 9.5% of the American adult population, estimated. That's a pretty large section. And depression alone is estimated to cause 200 million lost work days each year, which costs employers up to $44 billion with a B. So what we can do as employees is maybe find a way to nudge our companies into a more inclusive culture. As employers, try to work towards an inclusive culture. And if that happens, then employees may feel more comfortable coming with problems. Not necessarily saying, hey, mental health day. I mean, it took me a long time to get from I'm feeling bad, I can't work, to I need a day off. But before that, I would do very little for days. A week, I'd fill out my timesheet. It'd be my 35 to 40 billable hours, but of that, realistically, only 8 or 12 of those were productive and really worth the money. And I'd get angry that I couldn't function. Again, I'd get afraid because I wasn't succeeding, they're going to find me out. If I would have been more comfortable just saying before then, hey, I need a day off. This place is awesome, I need a day off just to recover. Instead of that fake 35 or so hours, maybe 8 hours of PTO and 32 hours of actual productive work that would have had much greater output. Another thing we could do is take the OSMI survey. If you're interested, it takes about 20 minutes. It's at osmihelp.org/research. OSMI also puts out some handbooks, which are mental health and tech guidelines for mental wellness in the workplace, guidelines for executives and HR professionals, and guidelines for employees. They're on LeanPub, DRM free. I highly recommend everybody gets them, share with everybody you know, because they're great. They are vetted by psychologists, lawyers, and based on the ADA. Seriously, if you have time, 20-minute survey. Appreciate it. Now, in open source tech, the community is the greatest resource. We have these events. I wouldn't be doing Drupal if it wasn't for meeting with the community in the Chicago area. 43%, that's a large chunk, had mental illness diagnosis. And above all else, it means that we're not alone being at these events. It means we're more than usernames. We're real people, which oftentimes online, it's easy to forget that if you're just looking at ones and zeros and text comments on Slack and issue queues. We're real people. We're not damaged. And with a little work together, we can erase the stigma. So I'd like to open up for questions. Yeah.
So you're taking medication, and I can see, I've heard the argument for if you're like too deep into the mental illness, like the medication can kind of kickstart your, put your brain in the right direction to begin with. But do you think like over time relying on the pills like doesn't benefit your mind and body for the long term?
For the long term, I really couldn't answer that. Again, the second or third slide, not a doctor. For me, I've been on the same medication for a few years now. I'm fortunate because it worked out for me right from the get-go. A lot of people, they have to go through 2 or 3, if not more, to find one that works for them, to find a dosage that works for them. I'm lucky that this one worked because there is a ramp-up period. The way that my medication works, it's a SSRI, which is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. What it does is basically blocks the pathways in your brain where the serotonin should be flowing, but in my brain, the serotonin flows and just goes back up. No, I'm afraid to go to the next step. The SSRI blocks those, so the serotonin has to keep flowing. Long term, I've known people who've been on antidepressants for a very long time. Okay. I don't see any, it hasn't been brought to my attention any long-term side effects or risks other than I have to drink a lot of water. That's not a bad thing. I can't drink as much alcohol as I used to. Again, not a bad thing. And occasionally I get tired. And not a great thing, but there are side effects, but the benefits greatly outweigh it. As I said, I'm a huge fan of better living through chemistry, but people who are more into the meditation, the physical stuff, if that works for them, if that gets the endorphins that offset the lack of serotonin, awesome. But as for 60 years worth of Lexapro, I couldn't tell you. Okay. I don't think it does any significant liver damage. I take too many Tylenol, you do more liver damage than probably a lifetime of Lexapro.
There's a big it depends on where you are in the spectrum of things.
Yeah.
And some people always need to be on medication. Some people need to be on short-term medications. Some people do kind without any.
Yeah.
It also depends on what kind of support system you have. I'm a practitioner of mindfulness-based stress reduction. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is the tool that we use as meditation. But we don't say that that is the only thing that all people need. It's not an either or.
Right.
It's a complement. So you might be on medication and do the mindfulness work and be fully functioning, and you might be able to come off the meds. They have found that if you have a very low level of anxiety or depression, then the meditation actually works as well as the meds. There's scientific evidence to that. There have been studies done. Other people cannot come off the meds, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But they're also helped by the meditation at the same time. So they complement each other.
Just like
So
there's-
a whole variety of individual guidelines. It has to be done individualized. Anybody who says there's like one way
Yeah.
of treating anything isn't telling the whole story.
If you've worked in Drupal for any time whatsoever, I'm sure you've heard the term, there's more than one way to theme a Drupal, more than one way to skin a Drupal.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to get treatment. And one thing that really, really dissuades people, especially in the first couple weeks of medication, for me, my doctor was very good about it to say, here, do this. Make sure you don't do this, and here's what you need to look out for. There is a ramp-up period. For me, it was about 4 weeks, and it was 4 weeks of hell. I could not get enough water. My mouth was dry all the time. I was irritable. I was extremely moody. I was not pleasant to be around. And I didn't notice it myself. It was the people around me who noticed, like, hey, you've changed for the better. You doing okay? And it was kind of after that first 4 weeks where I was like, well, I'm not feeling the side effects. Are you sure? But people around me noticed it. Also, if anybody gets on those medications, don't take yourself off cold turkey, because it will also be a very, very bad experience. A good physician will find a way to wean off, because your body has gotten used to it, has gotten used to the chemicals being there. If I go more than 24 hours without taking not an exact 24 hours, hey, it's 8 a.m., I'm gonna pop, but if I go more than a day without taking my medication, I start getting weird dizzy feelings, I start getting extremely tired, I start just not functioning. So I don't want to put myself in a situation where, hey, I don't think I need the medication anymore, I'm just going to drop it, because 24 hours is that bad. Going cold turkey without physician approval or support, probably going to be a lot worse. All right, it's 1:43. I think we're supposed to have a 15-minute break. Did either of you have any more questions or comments before I press the button again? Okay, thank you for coming.